In this video, I'll be talking through the steps of applying for a PhD programme. I'll be talking about PhDs available in the UK specifically, and I'll be referencing my experience as a student in the arts, humanities and social sciences space. That being said, I will be using very broad terms, so if you are interested in studying for a PhD in a different field, this should still be helpful. Just to quickly introduce myself, my name is Éireann. This is The Student Journey, a channel dedicated to supporting you on your own student journey as well as sharing insights of my own. I'm a first year PhD student, but I have applied for a PhD a couple of times. We'll talk about that more later. So hopefully I'll be able to use my experience to kind of guide you on your own process. If you're watching this video, I am assuming you are new to this field or just starting out in your journey and understanding of the PhD application process. So I will be offering top tips along the way. Just as a quick aside to begin, we will not be talking about studentships in much detail as part of this video. So the PhD application process, or the standard application process, is slightly different to those of you who might be applying for studentships. To define them, studentships are essentially pre-set programs that already have a kind of focus or perhaps even some research questions, and you as a potential PhD student might apply to this studentship where your research kind of question or focus has already been set up for you. You still come out with the same PhD, you still develop the same skill set, it's just your focus has already been decided before you even apply. There are loads of pros and cons for doing a studentship, but we won't get into them in too much detail in this video. I did apply for a studentship, and as somebody interested in studying education, I found a studentship available where some academics had gathered some funding to look into the experiences of students and their supporters applying for medicine, and how accessible that process was, who was applying, where were they getting their information. I applied directly to that studentship. I didn't get it in the end, it's not what I'm focusing on, but in that project what I found was a research question or a research topic had already been defined and there was money set aside to do that research. It was just a case of finding the right applicant. A standard PhD application is very different to that, and that's the kind of process we'll be talking about or following in this video. That being said, studentships are really interesting, and if they are something you think you might be interested in doing, do take the time to research them. They're very kind of straightforward to apply for, and they're very available in the sciences if you are a potential STEM student. So to make sure we're all on the same page, it's worth defining what a PhD actually is. So a PhD, which stands for a Doctorate of Philosophy, is essentially a postgraduate degree that you gain after, in the UK, studying for about 3 to 4 years. As part of this degree, you are expected to plan, conduct and write up a huge research project. So students spend 3 to 4 years doing this and essentially usually write up around 80,000 words at the end of their degree. Because of the intense research kind of nature / requirement of this degree, the first thing you do as part of your application is define and then write up a research proposal. So again, remembering that we are talking about standard application PhDs rather than studentships, what's different about these in comparison to your time at undergraduate or maybe even doing a master's is that it's not a taught course. It is a research degree in which you are expected to lead and very much kind of take ownership of that research project. So what's different about this is you don't apply to your PhD program with no idea of what it is you're planning to study. You as an applicant already need to have a clear focus and some clear research questions to show that you are a suitable candidate to undertake this research and guide it as the kind of principal investigator. That's not really a term we use when we talk about PhD projects because they usually only involve one person, but you are showing that you are ready to take ownership of this, that you have thought things through as much as you possibly can with the time you have to apply, and you are ready to do this. So for me, when I applied for the PhD I'm currently doing, I proposed a mixed method project into the relationship between socioeconomic background of the students in higher education and those same students' outcomes, so things such as degree classification or earnings after graduation. Before I even got to that kind of final proposal, I knew I was just interested in the experiences of working class students at undergraduate level, and I knew that was something I wanted to explore in some level. For others, this project could be anything, and that's anything that you're interested in within that discipline you're applying for. So it could be representations of families in fairy tales, or the sociolinguistics of Gen Z, or something much more sciencey that I do not have the capacity to understand or explain. But you need to know when you're applying for a PhD what it is you are planning to study, and to develop that into a research proposal, perhaps of about 1,000 words. So just as a starting point, know what it is that you want to research, do some reading around it, and develop your research proposal from there. The second thing you need to do is identify a supervisor who will be suitable to support you in undergoing this PhD project. Yes, the PhD project is self-guided, you are responsible for it, but you're not completely on your own. So if you are at an institution, it's most likely the case that you will be, or it's definitely the case that you'll be assigned a supervisor to guide you through this. And many universities expect you to identify the supervisor before you even apply. The supervisor you select should hold some sort of expertise in either the topic you're interested in looking at or the methods you plan on using. It's not just about status or who is the most senior person within that department, who is a professor and who isn't. It's more about how useful they can be in guiding you through this project. There are two ways you can essentially identify a supervisor. The first is quite a long-winded process, but it's usually the best way to go, and that is looking at university department websites. So once you know some of the universities you're interested in and the department that is best suited to doing your research, going onto their department website and searching through the different academics to see what their specialisms are, whether they're taking PhD students at the moment. Some university websites do make this easier than others, and they have different filters for different research projects, or you can look at the research groups or research centres in which an academic might be situated, and that can be really helpful. But there are some universities, including the ones I applied to, where this isn't clear cut, and where I had to very much look through every academic in alphabetical order. So it does take a long time, it is a bit boring, but it's really helpful in that websites will usually tell you if this person takes on PhD students, if they're taking them on at the moment, and what their research interests are. So look through that information to see who it is in particular departments that might be suited to you. A second way of finding a potential supervisor is essentially just doing some reading. So when reading or preparing your literature review, so reading about the subject, whose names keep coming up, where are they situated? That's a way of just seeing who has done research in this area. Of course, it's not the case that you're going to copy and paste their research or replicate it, but if they are consistently publishing and writing about a topic that you are interested in, perhaps they're the best person to supervise you. That being said, you then need to work out what institution that person is at, whether that's somewhere you're happy to study, and once again, whether they're actually taking on PhD students. Just to share my experience, I had a very broad research proposal. I definitely had a few research questions and a broad research interest. There were some universities I was more interested in, and I looked through their academic start. The supervisor I have now is somebody who I recognised within the department was most suited to my work, but also somebody whose name I saw come up in different papers and different projects that I was particularly interested in. So I definitely feel like doing a bit of both worked best for me. Depending on the department or university you are applying to, the next thing you should normally do is contact that supervisor. Now this is common practice, but there are some departments that discourage it, so make sure you look into that before you get in contact. You should email this person well in advance of any deadlines, essentially just letting them know you're interested in applying for a PhD, that you're interested in completing this PhD in your proposed kind of project or topic area, and asking if they have the availability, suitability and interest in acting as a supervisor for you. It's important to give yourself ample time to do this, because it may be the case that they say yes, they'd be really keen, they'd love to see a copy of the research proposal, and that they give you feedback and suggestions based on what you have sent them. Additionally, it's important to note that academics are extremely busy people, so if they don't get back to you at first, it's not because, you know, you're rubbish or they don't care, it's usually just because they're busy. And I definitely found that when I emailed my supervisor after not hearing from them in a while, they just said sorry, they're really busy, and you know, that they were grateful for the prompt. So do get in contact, do send reminders, but make sure you're sending them at kind of reasonable intervals. It may also be the case that this person doesn't have the capacity to take on any students because they are taking a break, because they're really overwhelmed, or because they are moving institution. It may also be that they don't think they're best suited to support you with your project, in which case they might even recommend someone else that they think would do a better job. In the instance that your PhD supervisor is interested and available and perhaps gives you loads of feedback on your application, please don't mistake this for a guaranteed place on the programme or guaranteed funding. That is not how PhD applications work. And they'll usually remind you of this. So all of that is done before you have even written out a full application or began to send anything off. So it really is a long process, and it's important you give yourself as much time as possible. Once you are ready to apply, quite a lot of information is required of you. The first being that research proposal, which may be about 1,000 to 2,000 words, basically identifying what it is you're hoping to research and why. So that could include a literature review section, a method section, and an overview of the context in which your work sits. You'll then need to send a personal statement, sometimes referred to as a statement of purpose. And this is, yes, similar to undergraduate in that it's just a broad kind of overall why it is you want to study this course, but it is slightly different in that it is much more focused. You aren't referring to things that are less relevant, such as A-levels. You may be referring more to things like work experience, but essentially you are justifying why it is that you as a candidate are particularly suited to doing this course and this project. One thing worth explaining is just how you got here if your trajectory has changed slightly. So you will find that there are some people who did something such as history of arts at undergraduate and are now interested in sociology. There may be a connection between the two, but it's up to you on your application or your statement of purpose to essentially explain that change. It's also worth noting that your statement of purpose only goes to the university and course you're applying to. It isn't like UCAS where it goes off to multiple institutions, so you can be as specific as you like to this particular course and this particular institution. You'll then have to send an academic CV, which by the sounds of it you can tell is different to a standard CV. This includes details of any research you've done, any prizes you've won, any presentations you have given. Now this was quite difficult for me as somebody who is new to academia, and actually pretty much everyone applying for a PhD is relatively new to academia. So if you would like a video on writing an academic CV and perhaps spicing up what you have, especially if what you have is limited, do please comment or message me or whatever can be done on YouTube to let me know that that's something you'd be interested in. You then need 1 or 2 references, ideally academic if possible, from somebody who has taught you or worked with you to advocate for your suitability to complete this PhD. Finally, for some applications you may need to submit some written work, and that's just to demonstrate, that you have the capacity to write well and that you can do so within this particular field. Now for me, I was lucky that I could use snippets of both my master's and undergraduate courses and send that over. But for some people who are particularly, again, moving to a new field or new subject area, it may be the case that you have to write something new, such as a book review or some reflections on a particular topic. As I said, it is a lot of planning and a lot of work to do, and I'm more than happy to make videos on specific parts of the application process if that would be helpful. Another thing worth adding is it's not really common practice that there are any kind of admissions tests for graduate studies in the UK, or at least none that I'm aware of for PhD specifically, so that isn't something you need to worry about or prepare for. That being said, I would always do my research just in case. If all of that goes well and the university or department you've applied to are interested in you as a candidate, they'll most likely then invite you to an interview. Now this will probably be done by your potential supervisor and another member of staff. And I guess to reassure you, it's just a conversation to essentially further unpick your research proposal, learn a bit more about you and your motivations for wanting to do this course. It is by no means meant to interrogate you or intimidate you. It's just a chance for the academics to check that you have thought through your research proposal and all the things that could happen. A really common question that comes up is access to data. With things like COVID, if you had proposed that you would do an ethnography, so a methodology that requires you kind of being physically present? What would you do if something like COVID hit? So it's just showing you've really thought through your proposal and that you know what can go wrong. I was talking to someone recently who was actually quite nervous about the limitations of their research proposal. What I would say is it's okay to highlight the limitations. By my understanding, I think that an academic supervisor would much prefer somebody who has put forward a research proposal with limitations that they are aware of and willing to think through, as opposed to somebody who perhaps doesn't perceive themselves as having any limitations, or perhaps has an easier research proposal. Being self-aware is a good thing, and it is how you problem solve, and I definitely feel like at the moment half the job of a PhD is just solving problems that occur. So please don't feel discouraged. If you recognize limitations, be open about them, be aware of them, and be prepared to talk through potential solutions. Finally, if you're successful, you may need to consider separate funding applications. Now for me, this is where I messed up quite a few times, or the reason I wasn't able to do a PhD on my first application. What I would say is there are so many reasons somebody doesn't get funding. Receiving funding for a PhD is notoriously difficult, and it's clearly something I've failed at quite a bit, but that is okay. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do a PhD, and it doesn't mean you're not capable. All I can say in this short video, or perhaps long video, we'll see how editing goes, is that you should do your application as early as possible. You should chat to your supervisor and any potential supporters about making your application as rigorous, as clear, and perhaps as impactful as possible, so that it really stands out to any funding bodies who are considering you. I hope this video has been somewhat helpful. I appreciate it is a huge task, and as I have said, I'd be willing to make videos in any part of the application process. I know that when I was applying, I felt very alone, I felt very lost at times, but it is definitely something that can be done, and can be done with the support of others. If you are in the process of beginning an application, I wish you all the luck in the world. I really hope it goes well. Thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully see you soon.